Hello and welcome to Straight Talk for 2012, brought to you by Straight Furrow. A new year and a new host. I'm Karen McCarthy. In the program this week, the contentious saga of the Crayford Farm sale. What's the big deal? Has the national interest been sold out? Will jilted buyers like Sir Michael Fay successfully challenge the deal? We seek some perspective. And Fonterra's frothing at the milk shake-up. What business does the government have messing about with raw milk regulations? Will it mean cheaper dairy products here at home? And the year ahead for farmers. Heads up, we look at what's on the rural radar for 2012. Joining me this week, Jeff Smith, veteran agricultural journalist and editor of the National Rural Weekly Straight Furrow, our valued sponsor, and Bay of Plenty farmer and a former chairman of Dairy for Federated Farmers, Lachlan McKenzie. Thanks for coming in.
Pleasure. We
can't ignore it. It's been all over the newspapers, the radio and the television the last couple of weeks, the Crayford Farm sale. What are your thoughts?
Well, part of the rural sentiment is that it's over, move on, but there seems to be a lot of ill-informed comment out there that is really missing the point. The issue is not about 16 farms, because there's 11,000 odd dairy farms in New Zealand. The issue, I think, to me is the fact that the ORO indicated that these people are going into milk processing, and that as a farmer supplying Fonterra, that I have to then supply yet another company setting up in New Zealand to take our milk.
So what this is what a business having to subsidise its competition?
Absolutely, and that's where the issue is. It's not, look, I'm in competition with all the other farmers to be the most efficient farmer, to make the most profit out of my land in a sustainable manner. And so we welcome competition coming into New Zealand, but when New Zealand owned, 100% New Zealand owned farms, our marketing division Fonterra having to supply milk to yet another overseas owned company, and it doesn't matter where it comes from, that will be then competing with us in the marketplace, that decreases export dollars for the whole of New Zealand, because they will be underselling us in the export market. And we have many, many examples of export industries in New Zealand, and the sheep and beef industry is a classic, where they have weak sellers, and that just decreases the price for everybody in New Zealand.
Jeff, there have been howls of outrage, unproductive, unpatriotic, gutless dire warnings about us becoming tenants in our own country. Is that how you see it?
Not at all. You'd have to look where these comments are coming from, what's generating them and what's behind them.
Where do you think they're coming from?
I think they're coming from interested parties, and particularly from a sore loser who is playing the patriot card. In my recollection of when he was doing business in this country, all the rules went out the window. So why you should suddenly turn around other than self-interest? You don't hear any outcry from farmers. I certainly haven't come across any. You've got public opinion polls running in the New Zealand Herald. Well, what do you mean? They're coming from urban people who have a bias anyway, and I think the xenophobia thing is alive and well. Is it simply because it's Chinese? What about the 20 dairy farms the Germans have just bought in Southland? You only ever see that in a positive light, just as reported as a matter of fact. And I can't escape the feeling that it's being generated by misinformation, disinformation and ignorance, quite frankly.
It's interesting, isn't it, Lachlan, too? We haven't seen sort of hide nor hair of Michael Fay through this. We know that he's involved in this this other bid. He hasn't fronted. He's been putting his spin doctor forward. Alan McDonald, I think, has talked to the media, but we haven't really seen or heard anything from Fay himself.
But again, they are sore losers. They didn't come up with the same amount of money. I firmly believe that if the receivers had split those farms up, we would have got more money. Look, I looked at some of those, was wishing to look at those farms when a real estate agent had them up for sale, and the real estate agent told me it was a waste of time putting in a price for one farm, because you wouldn't have got it. They were going to sell them as a total block. So the farming industry is concerned about the way the receivers behaved, the poor management of those farms while they're under receivership,
Why do you think the OIO didn't split the farms up? Why did they keep them together for a bulk deal? I mean,
well, the OIO wasn't asked to rule on that. That's not a decision for the OIO. Their decision is whether they allow this company to invest in New Zealand or not, you know, within the parameters of those rules. That's it. It wasn't, you know, but it's interesting, one of the conditions they've got on there of any processing facility that this company owns, that 50% has to be owned by New Zealanders. So I thought we were selling farms. And so what this signals is that this company has intentions of building a processing plant, and that the ownership of these farms is just a step in the door to build a processing plant in competition with our New Zealand-owned company.
And how much of a concern is that, if they wanted to have that much of, a presence in this country? If
the rules were on a level playing field, under the topic we're going to talk about, the DERA, well, then we don't care. I don't care if somebody else wants to come in and hang up a shingle and say, I want to buy milk in New Zealand. That's, you know, we've got an open door as far as commerce in New Zealand goes. And I welcome that. I welcome overseas investment in New Zealand as the same as I welcome New Zealanders going offshore and investing offshore. What I don't welcome is a government there that has tilts the field against us.
Do you think, Jeff, perhaps the government was afraid to say no to China? No doubt John Key has an eye on the upcoming 40th anniversary of diplomatic relations between the People's Republic and New Zealand. How likely was it the government would block the OIO's recommendation to approve the sale? Well,
my understanding of the rules is the government has no role. And if they had objected, the OIO overrules them anyway, as long as the only grounds that they can challenge it on is on a point of law and process. And if they follow the correct process, the government has no say. I think the government's been quite instrumental in stirring some of the opinion and saying, well, look, our hands are tied, it's useless, but, you know, maybe we're not happy about it, and if it keeps on going like this, we will tighten the rules. I think that's just errant nonsense. I don't think they have any intention of doing it.
You made the point before that, you know, other countries have bought farmland, and lots of it in the South Island, the Canadians, the Americans, the German and the Swiss, under the Labour government, and there hasn't been, you know, there wasn't a mutter or a murmur about that. As soon as the Chinese are mentioned, we're opposed to it.
Yeah, I think that's what it comes back to. In the last 3 years of the Labour government, they approved, through the OIO, 380,000 hectares. So it's pretty rich for them to come out and say, look at you, selling our heritage, we should be stopping it. When they did exactly, well, they were in charge when exactly the same thing was done. And again, they didn't have any control. They make the rules and they have to stick by the rules.
This whole sorry saga has dragged on for so long. I guess we should be glad at least we're seeing an end in sight to it, hopefully.
It is a sad saga that's happened. You never like to see any business go into receivership. I think the receivership laws in New Zealand have to change. So if there's some lessons to be learnt from this, I think we have to have smarter ways of easing people out of stressed companies rather than straight going from trading to receivership. I think there's smarter ways of doing that. I think we need to look at the receivership laws, how much power the receiver has. Banks seem to appoint a receivership and then walk away. Maybe we need to adjust that. So there are some lessons that we can learn from that. The fear of the Chinese is not one of them.
Thanks, gentlemen. Coming up after the break, the government's move to rein in Fonterra's market power. The dairy giant warns that proposed changes to raw milk regulations will see profits head overseas. Will it hinder or help us get more affordable milk here at home? The great milk shake-up after the break. Welcome back to Straight Talk, brought to you by Straight Furrow. I'm Karen McCarthy, and with me, Jeff Smith and Lachlan McKenzie. Fonterra is up in arms over proposed changes to raw milk regulations announced by the government last week, including that the giant dairy co-op publicly disclose how it sets its milk price. It may also have to sell 200 million litres more milk a year at a regulated price to other independent dairy companies. Lachlan, first, if I can come to you. The cooperative is already competing fiercely in international markets against tough foreign competition. Does it need this?
In a nutshell, no. Look, I don't think the government understands the difference between a cooperative, which, you know, I'll put my hand up, I'm a shareholder in Fonterra, a cooperative-owned business, effectively and an investment shareholder company. Effectively, Fonterra is the manufacturing and marketing division of the dairy farmers in New Zealand. And we compete fiercely with all other productions around the world, and majority of those countries that we export to are subsidised. We're free. We have an open and we have a pro-competition legislation in New Zealand which enables and encourages other people to come in and set up competition against us. The purpose of a cooperative, a producer cooperative like Fonterra, is to maximise the return back to its New Zealand members. That's what it is. If it's an investment company, the purpose of that is to maximise the return to its investors. So Fonterra will try and maximise the payout for its farmers for its milk, for its raw milk that it buys. An investment company will try and minimise the price that it pays to its farmers. And you can go anywhere in the world, and I've been to Australia for every year for the last at least 10 years. The Australian dairy farmers are suffering now because their significant cooperative, Murray Goulburn, now is in a weak position relative to the other companies. As Murray Goulburn reduces its payout to farmers, all other companies follow that price down. So if we reduced Fonterra's milk price, every other company reduces their price as well, because then they can put more money into their coffers.
Jeff, is this the government wanting to control an industry it doesn't need to control?
Well, my immediate reaction is that the government has a pretty strange way of supporting farmers. If this is the way they are supporting farmers, I'm lost for words almost. As a newspaper, we're very much on the farmers' side and have been for ever since foundation 70 years ago, and this one we're in boots and all, because it's not as though Fonterra is a monolithic foreign company that's milking all the profits offshore. Every cent that's made is spent within New Zealand, or at least on New Zealanders when they're working for Fonterra in the Middle East or whatever. And when all said and done, it's their product. The milk belongs to the farmers. It doesn't belong to the government. And to say that, you know, we're going to bring the price down of milk, if that's feasible, or if that's their intention, why do these people that take the subsidised milk from Fonterra not enter the market? If there is such a market, it's almost like an add-on, and I quite frankly don't understand. And I think that the farmers have got the dairy farmers have got every right to be very upset about this. And if the government's going to get into the business of agriculture, well, what's next? Are they going to start dabbling in the wool industry and making restrictions on that? And I don't know.
Has Fonterra perhaps brought this on itself by not being as transparent as it should be?
Hey, it is transparent.
I think, from my view as a journalist, Fonterra is very transparent, and when all's said and done, it doesn't belong to me, it doesn't belong to you, it belongs to the people who supply it the milk. And as long as they're happy with it, where's the problem?
It's fair to say Fonterra hasn't won the hearts and minds of consumers, though, has it?
Oh, look, but there's two issues. One is the domestic market, and one is the export. Fonterra's not going to like me saying this, but I think Fonterra in the domestic market has about 12% of the share of the retail brand. 12%. Goodman Fielder has about another 13 or something. So between Goodman Fielder, Watty and Fonterra, they own about 25% of the branded product of milk sales. 60% I think is with the supermarket brand in milk. So, but this dairy milk, as Jeff alluded to, none of the startup companies that are taking this subsidised milk are actually providing milk into the domestic market. They're taking the milk at a regulated price, and as soon as you get a regulated price, it's not going to be in sync with the marketplace. It's out of sync. So this milk is costing the farmers that supply Fonterra. We choose to supply Fonterra because we know we get the benefit through that. Yet my tanker comes and picks up the milk from me, and it has to go to the opposition company, which costs me. They then sell that on the export market overseas, not in the New Zealand market. These farmers, these other companies that are saying that Fonterra is paying too much for its milk. In other words, what they're saying is they want to get to buy the milk off New Zealand farmers cheaper. What other industry could get away with saying we want to buy goods from New Zealanders at a cheaper price? If anybody else said that, there'd be, everybody be screaming up and kicking them out of the country. I can't follow the logic of the government, and that's, for me to try and find a solution the way through, I have to try and understand. What I try and do is try and understand the person that I'm discussing with. If I disagree with somebody, I try and understand where their logic is and where they're coming from, and I can't in this case. So it just seems to be illogical for me for a government, one of the most successful industries in New Zealand, it's had phenomenal growth. We'd be in dire straits economically if we hadn't had the massive increase in exports from the dairy industry over the last decade or so.
The Minister, David Carter's been very much under the radar on this. What would you say to him, given the chance?
Well, what we're saying is that the regulations are not working. What's the purpose of this regulation? And it seems that there's a mix-up between the regulations and milk price. All this dairy milk is going for export companies, so it doesn't affect the domestic price for milk. Fonterra has to supply 250 million litres of milk to Goodman Field for the domestic consumption. I think the New Zealand domestic consumption is around about 400 million litres of milk a year. That is, we could give away that milk and we'd be better off with no regulation in our place. It's not going to, we need to look at what farmers get for the milk. We get about 60 cents a litre. It costs about another 55, 60 cents to process and put that milk on a shelf in a supermarket. So the wholesale price for milk is around about $1.30, $1.20, $1.30. It is illegal for Fonterra to set the retail price of milk in New Zealand. They can set the wholesale price. So they can sell the milk to anybody who wants to buy the milk from them, and they do. They're willing to sell it for around that price. Then it's the retailer that puts their margin on it. The government makes more money, the 30 cents from GST for the two litres of milk, than the profit that Fonterra and the dairy farmers make. So that's, when you put it in that context, where is the profit margin being made?
Coming up, what else is on the rural radar for 2012? And we ask our guests what they want to get off their chests. Will it be a rant or a rave? More Straight Talk in a moment. Welcome back to Straight Talk, brought to you by Straight Furrow. Time now for our guests to share brickbats or bouquets about matters rural. Jeff, what has been on your mind? And I guess it's hard to escape those two topics we've just been talking about. Well,
what's on my mind is pretty basic. That in all the time that I've been associated with farming, and I'm fifth generation, the National Party has always been the party of the farmer. They didn't even think about voting who they were going to vote for. And I see things changing dramatically. We ran an editorial this week from a very traditional national supporter who has just taken the whole thing and dissembled it. Labor's no longer Labor. Labor used to represent the workers. National represented the farmers. Well, as I said in my front page this week, if this is how they support farmers, they've got a strange way of doing it. And I can see, if you're saying what's going to happen in 2012, I can see far more conflict between the farmers and what has normally been their party. This year, well, in the last election, I thought the only party that had a farmers at interest, interests at heart, was the ACT Party.
Is the honeymoon over? Are you saying?
Well, I don't think it exists. John Key is a pragmatic businessman. He's a money dealer, and one has to say, from my observation, that anything he does with the farmer, is basically tokenism. And I can see some dramatic things happening in the next couple of years for the National Party and the rural vote.
Lachlan, tractors on the steps at Parliament. Do you agree?
Unfortunately, yes, I do. But look, let's put a positive on this. I think 2012 is the year of the co-op, International Year of the Co-op. What we've got to have is, in New Zealand, we've got to celebrate success. You know, the Aussies are great at celebrating success for their sporting heroes. You know, we don't even, really support our sporting heroes in New Zealand. And we sure as hell don't support our business successes in New Zealand. We have a success story in the dairy industry. I'm proud to call myself a businessman and a farmer, a dairy farmer at that. You know, it is a sad indictment on society when people are not going to Christmas functions and the barbecue because they're getting ostracised as a dairy farmer. You know, that's a sad indictment on New Zealand when they're picking on a minority in New Zealand, and the dairy industry is a minority in number-wise. And so we've got to celebrate our success. We are successful at turning our sun, our pastures, into carbohydrates and products. We've got sheep in the background here. You know, the meat and fibre from our hills, the dairy products from our flatter land, our horticultural crops that we have, our trees that are growing on the hills. You know, we are very successful at feeding and putting fibre out there for the world. And we are very good. Fonterra spends over $100 million a year in research and development. We've got the majority sales in lactose for asthma inhalers around the world. You know, that's a success story that we've got that is owned by New Zealanders, still run in New Zealand, and all the profits come back to New Zealanders. That's a success, and I think we should build on that. We should keep understanding those successes. Why is it successful, and how do we keep on building on that success?
Jeff, do you agree there's too much focus on the negative that we need to celebrate?
Comes back to a very basic tenet of my job. Criticism is easy. It's the easiest thing, just like it's the easiest thing to write about a disaster. It's all there for you. And unfortunately, it's part of New Zealand character that they criticise, whether it's through envy. Remember the days of SMP when farmers were given so-called handouts by Muldoon. The townies just went absolutely troppo over that, and the same thing is happening now. It's an envy thing. They perceive that every dollar that the dairy farmer gets for his milk goes into his pocket. Well, nothing could be further from the truth, and it's based on ignorance, but it's more based on envy. And I think that's one of the big problems we have in this country, is envy.
You know, Fonterra and Sanitarium have done an excellent job with breakfast in schools, in the low decile schools, and now they're going to try a new version of milk in schools in Northland. That's coming out of farmers' pockets. Fonterra's not paying for that. It's farmers' profits that are paying for that. So New Zealand farmers, and we welcome that. We welcome those trials. It's not going to be the old school days when I was there and had thick cream on the top of a bottle. It's going to be in a new package, refrigerated, a highly nutritious food that we're going to share with New Zealanders. None of these other overseas companies that have this regulated milk are doing anything for the local community.
They don't have that investment.
Can I just say that
emotional investment.
This is where I see the cynic thing, or the knocking thing, is people, instead of embracing that, are saying, what a cynical thing for Fonterra to do to take the attention off the milk price. So how do you win? How do you win?
That's part of the community spirit. Who come along with water tankers, stopped picking up milk and provided water tankers on every road that they could get into Christchurch when we had a disaster down there.
It's the farmers, the backbone of this country.
Fonterra had the facilities there, it had the tankers, and it didn't hesitate. Within hours of getting the phone call, they had that water sitting there on the street with their trained team to distribute water to needy people in New Zealand. That's what we do. The farming community has a history and brought up a tradition of helping each other. We've had to, because we've lived in rural environments where resources are scarce and you have to look after each other. And that's a culture that we like to keep in our company, and a culture that we like to share with New Zealanders. We won't get that culture in other companies. So that's a culture that I'm proud of, and that we're more than happy to share with the rest of the New Zealanders.
That's all we have time for this week on Straight Talk, brought to you by Straight Furrow. Thanks very much to my guests, Lachlan, McKenzie and Jeff Smith, and to you too for watching. I'm Karen McCarthy. Hope you'll join us again next week for more Straight Talk.